So this is a very interesting article. The headlines: Uber and Lyft, the losers of ride-hailing under autonomy. So autonomous vehicles are on the horizon, and their implementation in the ride-hailing market will be the first adaptation of them for public use. Uber and Lyft have operated mostly undisturbed by competition in the ride-hailing market for quite a while, but autonomous vehicles will bring about a new wave of entries into the market. General Motors, Waymo, and Tesla will be the strongest competitors for the two ride-hailing giants out of the gate and will encroach upon their market share with a superior service. Uber is unable to justify its nearly 65 billion valuation, and in the coming years will begin to see dramatic reductions in its value as the reality of its future begins to become more apparent. And I completely agree with the direction of this article. I've read it. Very interesting. Autonomous driving is something that is often disregarded as science fiction and for the distant future. What you may learn in this article is that this isn't quite true, and self-driving vehicles may be coming to streets near you quite soon. With the emergence of autonomous driving will come a dramatic shift in how the ride-hailing market, on which companies like Uber and Lyft have been working so hard to capture as much as possible, will change dramatically. Companies that don't currently compete in the sector, like General Motors, Tesla, and Alphabet, could become some of the biggest players in the market. One of the previous articles details an important component of the road to autonomy, the usage of LiDAR, L-I-D-A-R. And if this is something you deem to be important, I would recommend reading it before this article. Through this article, I will discuss the various new players in the changing market and how their differing approaches and positions within the market will lead to the ultimate success or failure of their endeavors. Developmental process. Now it's time to meet all of the players. I've already mentioned Uber, Lyft, General Motors, and Tesla, but Alphabet's Waymo, founded in 2009, is also putting in a lot of work to make autonomous driving a reality. In fact, the company received approval back in July 2019 to operate its small fleet of autonomous vehicles in the California South Bay area. However, this approval still requires an employee to sit in the front of the vehicle, ready to take it if something goes awry, and is exclusive to Waymo's employees. Yet, curiously, Waymo had also received permission to test its vehicles without a test driver in Santa Clara County. Shortly before this, Waymo partnered with Lyft in order to provide customers with access to their self-driving vans just outside of Phoenix, Arizona. However, Waymo also operates independently in the greater Metro Phoenix area, providing rides to a select group of clientele. Quite recently, Waymo actually committed to 100% driverless rides in Phoenix to all members of the public, eliminating the backup driver from all offered rides and fully utilizing their permit. In the Metro Phoenix area, as well as Santa Clara County, Waymo continues to be the only autonomous vehicle company that is permitted to offer rides without a backup driver present. Very interesting. Waymo's autonomous vehicle uses a diverse sensor suite comprising 5 LiDARs, 5 cameras, and 5 radars. Each of these components is meant to create the clearest possible image of the vehicle surrounding, from depth to what direction a pedestrian is walking. The brain behind turning all of this data into driving control is an Intel chip designed specifically for autonomous driving. The computer chip is actually incredibly important, as it must be powerful enough to process up to 5 gigabytes of data per second, with calculations taking mere fractions of a second. However, there is one more thing that Waymo is doing on the software side in order to operate their vehicles. The company creates an incredibly detailed three-dimensional map of every area that its cars will drive in before they hit the roads. This, paired with highly accurate GPS, allows for a greater source of driving precision, as the maps act as more of a guide than a sensor suite. This pairing makes the sensors play more of a support role, as they account for any changes in the environment, such as other cars, pedestrians, or traffic lights that aren't on the maps. Unfortunately, this also geofences the locations that Waymo can operate its fleet based on the creation of such detailed maps. Waymo is also utilizing deep learning software in order to try and train the autonomous software as simulating as if it were a car driving on real streets. In their simulations, Waymo has driven over 15 billion miles. Wow. With total with 20 million simulated miles every day. This high level of data training is incredibly important to develop the effectiveness of Waymo software in order to make sure that the vehicle can make the most out of all the data they collect. Tesla, which first unveiled its semi-autonomous driving system in 2015, has a pretty different approach than Waymo. Beyond the aversion to LiDAR, which I believe to be quite wise, the company does not use any precise mapping. Instead, the car relies solely on the information taken from its hardware and processed by its software. Tesla's sensors suite uses 8 cameras, 12 ultrasonic sensors, and 1 radar. The company's proprietary computer chip is also a large part of the working of the company's autonomous driving and boasts some pretty impressive specs as an industry leader, making 36 trillion operations per second with HD footage. To apply all of this hardware, Tesla began offering Autopilot. Autopilot began as a mere driver assist system, but started to grow to semi-autonomous highway driving and steering assist on tighter, more complex roads. Tesla began on highways in order to train their system with more simple driving compared to city driving, which adds a multitude of complexity in terms of traffic laws, stop signs, traffic lights, crosswalks, bikers, etc., and road density. Highway driving was the easiest place to start. By introducing the system at a greater level of simplicity, the company was able to iterate on its basic driving capabilities without worrying about other complications. On the city streets, though, Tesla has been training its neural network to recognize all of the necessary markings in something they call shadow mode. Shadow mode allows Tesla to train its fleet as if Autopilot was actually active, collecting real-world data without jeopardizing road dwellers with a juvenile driving system. Tesla's use of its large fleet as the main training source of its neural network is an advantage that other companies just don't have access to. This is perhaps Tesla's greatest advantage. While the company does also utilize its own simulations to train its software, the advantage of a tremendous amount of real-world data is unrivaled and hugely important, even at Waymo CEO John Krafcik's own admission. General Motors is pursuing autonomous driving through its subsidiary, Cruise Automation, a company founded in 2013 by Kyle Vogt and Dan Kahn. The company uses 5 LiDAR sensors, 16 cameras, and 21 various types of radar sensors. This is far more than any other companies, as Cruise seems to be a proponent of the idea that the more data available to the computer, the easier the software's job is. While this may seem intuitive, more data can overtax the computer chip and raises costs with expensive sensors that some may seem as unnecessary. Cruise, just like Waymo, uses Intel as its chip supplier to act as the brain for all of the information that is gathered by the various sensors. Cruise also operates on the California streets and is racking up its test miles. To clarify, Cruise has been testing in California for some time, but this permit granted early in 2020 now allows them to carry passengers as long as a backup driver is present. A more recent permit allows for incredibly limited testing for autonomous rides without a backup driver present. The limitations include permission for just 5 test vehicles, no driving during heavy fog or rain, and speeds not exceeding 30 miles per hour, all within San Francisco. Additionally, Cruise will still be limiting their passengers, driverless or with a driver, and be unable to charge them. Cruise also launched a very limited program called Cruise Anywhere back in 2017 that has offered free rides to employees on the company in San Francisco. But inside the simulation, Cruise is driving a 1/100th of the number of miles that Waymo is doing daily. Interesting. At 200,000 miles a day, Cruise is doing good work, but there's no denying that advantage that being a sub-company of Google can do for your machine learning capabilities. While being owned by General Motors doesn't provide Cruise the same advantage that Tesla has with its fleet, GM cars aren't equipped with fully autonomous driving hardware as Tesla vehicles are. It does provide an advantage for designing their sensor suite. The company is provided with a clear blueprint to follow and can develop the sensors to fit with the vehicles manufactured by General Motors. Now that they've got their competition out of the way, it's time to move on to the main subjects of this article. Uber and Lyft. Beginning with Lyft, the company began its autonomous endeavors in 2017 and is taking a bit of a mixed approach to their autonomous development. Lyft has partnered with Aptiv, APTV, to develop their autonomous driving capabilities in Las Vegas, while also developing their own technology independently in Palo Alto, California. Lyft's partnership with Aptiv, however, seems to be exclusively in providing the ride-hailing software while Aptiv develops its autonomous capabilities independently, and doesn't look like it will expand outside of the Las Vegas pilot program. So where do Lyft's own autonomous capabilities stand? Lyft, as I mentioned early on, began developing its own autonomous driving capabilities 3 years ago in 2017, a good amount later than most of its competitors. However, in that time, the company has made large strides in advancing its technology and has piloted a rapid rate of development. 2019 was when Lyft's first autonomous vehicles hit the California roads, and while the company still lags behind companies such as Waymo and Cruise by a significant margin, in terms of total autonomous miles driven, the progress is promising to watch. To observe its surroundings, Lyft vehicles are equipped with 6 cameras and 3 LiDAR sensors. In its simulation, Lyft is using data gathered from its ride-sharing service, leveraging its massive fleet in a manner similar to Tesla. Lyft is also creating highly detailed 3D maps, again by leveraging data from its massive ride-hailing fleet. These 3D maps are incredibly helpful sources of base navigation for autonomous vehicles, and Lyft's decision to begin to incorporate them will likely help expedite the development of their vehicles. Even so, the company is still quite far behind its competitors and will be stuck playing catch-up for the foreseeable future as a consequence of their late entry. Uber had the most controversial involvement in autonomous development thus far. A fatal collision in 2018 caused Uber to halt all testing in Arizona, the area of the fatality where they had been testing since 2016. Uber also decided not to renew its California testing permit after its expiration in 2018. Neither area allowed passengers to be present in the vehicles. Uber announced in 2015 that it would be pursuing autonomous driving just a year before beginning tests in Arizona. This obviously caused massive delays in their program, as Uber's work in the field was incredibly limited, but their hiatus only lasted for 9 months, resuming tests in Pittsburgh. Uber was back on the streets working on the autonomous vehicles. However, even though the company had returned to the roads, testing was still severely limited, operating only during the day in optimal weather conditions without exceeding 25 miles per hour. The cars were working with one hand tied behind their backs. It wasn't until more recently that Uber has been able to really resume their testing. To date, Uber is still only operating autonomous vehicles in San Francisco and Pittsburgh with test drivers behind the wheel ready to take over if need be. Uber's return to San Francisco is still rather fresh, beginning earlier this year, and much like in Pittsburgh, is still quite limited. Daylight tests in ideal weather conditions continue to restrict Uber's accumulation of meaningful data, as their system is not pushed in the slightest. This makes the simulation the only place for Uber to train and analyze its software in any form of challenging conditions. Unfortunately, Uber's behind the curve here too, as simulation testing began only in 2018 following their fatal accident. Since it was made public that they began operating simulations, Uber has been very quiet about what exactly goes on within the simulations, which leads me to believe that they have been unable to produce anything remarkable, and their late entry into the technology has hurt them quite a bit. I agree. So as far as, this is a long article, as far as regulatory approval, etc., I'm going to leave the link for you so you can keep on reading. Fascinating stuff here. Shout out to Cova, my sponsor. It's a gig protection plan for drivers and food delivery companies. It starts at $7 a month. If you get deactivated, they kick in. They have a legal arm called LegalRideshare that gets you back into the seat. If you have had an accident or if you're in the hospital, they kick in and cover 80% of your lost earnings. Now, LegalRideshare is in Chicago. It's a law firm. They've also partnered with Cova. They will go after insurance companies and handle your claim if you have been in an injury, if you've had car property damage, or if you have incurred wage losses. And that is at LegalRideshare.com. The article covers regulatory approval, and as you can see, still a lot of reading. So it also talks about the new market, about autonomous vehicles. Gone into a lot of detail here, so do go check it out. I'm going to leave this link for you guys underneath the video. Enjoy the reading. Thank you.